Hello everyone, welcome to today's episode of the Let's Talk About Everything series. It's the last couple of videos to end the month and I'm very excited. For the rest of the videos I have some really amazing guests and we're delving into different topics that will definitely impact you and help you as you plan your year. For today's episodes I have with me Global HR Director, Recruitment, Policy and so many other things, Natasha Stevenson. Hi, Natasha.
Hi, how are you?
Very well,
Thanks
thank
for
you.
having me.
Thank you so much for coming. So today, Natasha and I are going to be unpacking how Dubai compares against other global cities. And this particular topic was inspired by a post by Dr. Amina Yunus on Twitter. So I'm going to read her post specifically, and then we're going to have a conversation around it. So join us on the journey. Now, Dr. Amina says, living in the UAE for 2 months now, here are some of my observations. It's the safest place on earth. I haven't locked my car door or house in a month. Now she writes safest in caps. Now people are motivated. Everyone is striving to be better, to do better, and success is proudly celebrated. Now water, gas, electricity bills are a fraction of the price in the UK. Customer service is unmatched. You can actually smile and have a conversation with your waiter. Adults love kids and everything is built with them in mind. Children are viewed as a blessing, not an inconvenience. Women do extremely well here within all fields, including entrepreneurship, healthcare, teaching, finance, and more. Good quality furniture and appliances are so cheap. The prices really did shock me and everything gets delivered to your house and assembled. Amazing. So, Natasha, as someone that has lived in different parts of the world, you've lived in Singapore, you lived in Boston, you lived in New York. What do you think about what Dr. Amina Yunus has to say?
Yeah. Well, I think you have to take it from a couple different perspectives first. So I'll first say I'm a woman who's in my later 30s. So I think when you're living somewhere, it's what's suited for you. And so the things that I'm focused on might be different from what, say, a family of 4 is focused on too. But when I think about the similarities, so growing up in Boston, moving to Singapore, working in New York from a travel standpoint, going to our office, and then now coming to the UAE, I would say there's a lot of similarities that I see in Singapore and the UAE. Safety, efficiency. You know, she talked about getting things delivered. I love getting my stuff delivered, groceries, packages, same day deliveries. Not to say those things aren't happening in the US, but there's a level of efficiency that I think and speed that happens way more in these regions. And so I love it. I don't think I could go back to a world where I don't have some of that stuff. I'll touch on the point of safety. As a single woman, I moved to Singapore by myself. And then again, I moved to the UAE, I moved to Dubai by myself. And so the thing that really drew me in was that safety. I never felt a moment where I couldn't walk on a street by myself. Not to say things don't ever happen. No country, no region is perfect. But I think for me, it was this place of like, if I didn't lock my car door, if I left my purse somewhere for a moment, there's really not going to be anybody that's going to touch it. Now, do I have that same feeling in Boston where I grew up? Probably not. I'm not going to leave my purse out on my grocery cart. But that's the different dynamic. And I think obviously governments and the policies and the things that are kind of focused on from a safety standpoint.
Yeah. Amazing. I have this personal experience as well, especially where safety is concerned. Coming from Africa, from Nigeria specifically, and having visited lots of other parts of Africa as well, I would always feel like that safety point was one of the most important things for me here. I leave my door unlocked. Like my friends that visit are always like, are you really gonna leave the door unlocked? Are you gonna leave the car unlocked? Are you really gonna park your car on the street? I'm like, yes, because the UAE is optimized for this. And I want to specifically compare the UAE and Singapore because I know that a lot of people in conversation always just mention Singapore and UAE as different models. What was your experience when certain or some of these indices were concerned in Singapore versus the UAE?
Yeah, so I think back to the safety point of what you just said, CCTV is kind of everywhere. Now, some may look at that as like they're impeding on my privacy, but we all hold a phone. So there's really no privacy in life too much anymore. So again, I remember I left my door unlocked for weeks when I went home to the States to visit in Singapore. And there was never a moment. Now, I'm not saying you should do that. I'm not saying nothing ever happens. But I never had a moment of really feeling like something was going to happen to my stuff.
Okay.
Or that safety.
Okay.
Was
So,
there.
which of those countries would you feel is at a higher level?
Oh, at a higher level. You know, I haven't been in the UAE long enough, but I think they're comparable. I don't think it's about one higher than the other. And again, I think it's where you're at as a person. So I don't have children. So a mother maybe they see Singapore just from their child's perspective and that safety. For me, as a single woman, I kind of see them as equal right now. And so I think that's what's made some of the transition a bit easier for me.
So she touched on two other things. She talks about motivation. She talks about how people are very motivated, people are striving to be motivated. You know, when it comes to motivation, personally, I agree with her personally, because every time I used to visit Dubai a lot before I finally moved around 5 years ago. And one of the things I would know is every time I came, there was something different. It was like the city was like a canvas, and there's always just a stroke of the brush, always. And recently, in spite of some of the things that happened with the rains and the weather conditions, the government has now planned about a couple of billions of dirhams to invest in upscaling the city where sustainability is concerned, where future-proofing is concerned, to avoid some of these things in the future. And then we're looking at the city and we're seeing all manner of changes. We're seeing new metro lines, we're seeing so many different things happen. So I want to talk first about motivation. What would you feel? Have you felt the same energy that's in the air as well that she's talking about?
Yeah, 100%. You know, and again, I'll do a bit of a comparison, but Singapore, similar to the UAE, has a lot of that entrepreneurial tech, people coming to really break into an emerging market. And again, this is a personal opinion. I feel it more here in the UAE. There's something about the energy, and you talked about the floods, you know, people coming together. You know, it's not perfect. No country, again, is perfect from an infrastructure standpoint, but they learned. And they're saying, okay, we're going to put our money where our mouth is, essentially, to kind of say we need to fix this. But I saw the community come together, the government, the leadership, to say, okay, you know what, we need people to not pay for insurance for a period of months so that they don't get back up in terms of the things that they need to pay, that they can really focus on getting their houses back in order. I feel the energy of kind of that entrepreneurial mindset is heavier here. And I've felt that in my networking as I'm looking for a job.
Yeah.
And people really coming together and saying, I feel your pain. I know what it's like to really jump into a new market, really grind and drive a business or try to work for a global corporation. And for me, I've seen it a bit more here. Not to say that it's never there in Singapore, but there's just a different energy and mindset. Like you said, it's a canvas.
Yeah.
Even in the short months of me being here, I've seen worlds being built right in front of my eyes from day one. And so it's exciting.
Okay. Another thing I want to talk about is leadership posture. Because leadership posture is one of the most important things that I find really changes society and changes worlds. And here I want to compare the US and the UAE specifically. Because, see, structure of leadership in the US is very interesting. So at the state level, there's very strong leadership, and at the federal level, there's very strong leadership as well. While leadership here is very central, very focused, and I find that the leadership structure here sometimes makes things move faster. And then from a posture perspective, for example, the government this month is releasing all salaries on the 24th for employees of government, and government employees heavily here. That's compassion and empathy at a level that we sometimes won't find in the West, for example. Yeah, so I want to talk about, I want you to help me juxtapose the leadership structure and just...
leadership. You know, I think I'm probably going to give a bit of the politically correct answer on this is you have to look at first scale. So you're looking at the US, a continent, it's massive. It's, like you said, state and federal. And so things are handled at different levels in a different way for what works maybe for that state, what works for the country. And then you take, I won't even say the full UAE, let's just take Dubai as a state, and then Singapore, much smaller scale. And so with that concentration, you're able, what I would feel, is to be able to probably influence a bit more as a leadership. There might be a bit more plethora of resources and finances being able to put into these things that allow for quick impact. So going back to, we're realizing from an infrastructure standpoint, the drainage, it's not great. But the leaders came together and said, okay, we now need to put $1 billion funds into that so that we don't come back into this type of predicament. The states, I don't know if it's not necessarily having a lack of empathy, because I think that might kind of generalize the US as a whole. I think it's just things are approached in a different way, older countries. And so I think the things that I love, again, being here, being in Singapore, is a bit more of that smaller kind of focus. And I think futuristic way of thinking. What are we doing today? How do we continue to grow tomorrow? Whereas sometimes, maybe, and again, personal opinion, the US may have a bit of a different, older perspective mindset on certain things. Not perfect.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's kind of how I look at it.
Amazing.
You know, it's not a one size fits all.
Okay. Very politically correct. I see you. So the last two things I want to talk about is diversity, and I also want to talk about women. Now, in diversity, the US, for example, is a very it's a mature market. Now, in 2020, we began to see diversity politics really come to the fore a lot more. It's always been there, but I guess the Black Lives Matter movement and a couple of things that happened pushed diversity to the fore. Now, looking at the UAE, for example, the UAE is 90% expats. So, from that perspective, there's a lot of diversity here already, because there are a lot of people from different cultures, from different. Yeah, so I want to, in the time that you have been here, I want you to talk about diversity, what you found in terms of diversity in the US versus diversity here in the UAE. And then we can extend it to Singapore as well.
Yeah. I think the first thing you have to realize about diversity is that it's a broad spectrum of many things. So it's not just about necessarily ethnicity or sexual orientation. When you have a time, look at the diversity wheel.
Yeah.
And so we also think of diversity of thought. And so again, I think it comes back to where you are at in your life and what diversity means to you, or what you're looking for from a diversity standpoint. Obviously, as a woman, I'm always looking at things from a woman's lens, and I say brown and black woman because my mother's Hispanic. And so there are things that I'm hyper focused on. I have been able to see diversity in a broader lens because I've started to be more exposed to different cultures. And I think that's the main reason for me why I continue to be an expat. You know, Singapore, I was with a company in the US. They moved me to Singapore to be the head of recruitment there and really build up that region. And then as I thought about the things that motivate me and passionate about, it's cultures. It's learning about localization. It's understanding I have a US lens, but I also want to understand these cultures from here on the ground. How are women portrayed anywhere? I've had friends here in the UAE. Again, people have a perception of maybe a woman wearing a hijab or a scarf and being like, oh, she must feel, you know, she's second class. And yet I have women who are friends that are Muslim and go, no, I feel equally at the table with my peers, whether it be men or women. Again, maybe not everybody, but those are some of the sentiments that I've heard. I feel diversity because we are an expat community. I'm able to meet people from more Africa, Nigeria, Ghana, Zimbabwe. I'm able to be around a lot of, you know, European individuals, as well as there are some Americans here. I swear. So I see diversity in the way that people do business. And I think that's what energizes me. Specifically, I'll pinpoint on the UAE, is it's not just about the cultures, the ethnicities, it's the energization of and the diversity of how they want to drive business, how they want to grow their wealth, how they want to live their life. And that's what interests me here.
Amazing. So let's end with women. So she makes a statement about women. So she talks about how women do extremely well within all fields: entrepreneurship, healthcare, teaching, finance, and more. Now, earlier, before we started, you were talking about meeting a senior female in leadership here in the UAE. There are lots of heads of CEOs of banks here that are women. There are lots of other industries that are being headed by women here. So what would you say has been your experience, and what would you say is driving some of this behavior from the Middle East perspective, especially where for people that are looking from outward in, there's a stereotype around women in the Middle East, but I find that that's not yet at all here. The UAE has been very deliberate about some of these things.
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say, again, I've been here for such a short time, but what I have seen and learned is this. If people have one perspective and they may think, oh, there's not women in leadership around here, that's not true. Just to the points that you said. But I think it's about the networking and seeing these women and the things that they're doing to really propel their careers or businesses or whatever it might be. And so I think the way that I've been able to see that or get connected to the right women is networking. If this is the place, again, going back to networking, I've been in recruitment. I've been a recruitment leader, recruitment for almost over 16 years. I've always networked. I probably look back at most of my jobs and there's been an element of networking that's gotten me that job. I've never seen it, how important it is here. And I think because of that, I've been able to meet women and really understand that women have a seat at the table. We still have continued growth, a long way to go in some areas, but there really is that. And I think I challenge people who may just not understand that. Do your research. Really have the conversations to understand the businesses that women are driving and running. The groups, I'll give a plug, Black Girl in Dubai, Women Who Thrive. These are amazing women who are driving membership networking groups that are really impacting and highlighting, Black-owned businesses, women businesses, and just educating us so that we can be better and stronger for what we need to do.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Natasha. Those were very, very strong, powerful points. So guys, you've heard from Natasha. She's done very good comparison. Dubai was Singapore, was Boston, was New York. And one thing to plug in, Dubai and the UAE is doing an amazing job to accelerate and to place itself at the top where a lot of these indices are concerned. So like Dr. Amina said, Dubai is a really great place. Thank you very much, guys, for joining today's episode. See you tomorrow.